Ludwig II, the fairy tale king of Bavaria. On June 13, 1886, something peculiar happened. Ludwig and a doctor went for a walk near the lake by Berg Castle. They didn't return when expected, and people began to worry and search for them. Later on, both Ludwig and the doctor were found dead in the shallow water. Officials said Ludwig died by suicide and that the doctor died while trying to save him. But many people didn't believe that story. Ludwig was a strong swimmer, and they were found near the shore where the water was not very deep. Also, there was no water in Ludwig's lungs, which isn't usually the case when someone drowns. Over the years, people have wondered what really happened. Some think he tried to flee and had a heart attack. Others believed he was harmed by people who didn't want him to ever be king again. No one knows for certain. Today, King Ludwig II's dreamlike buildings still draw and delight people from all over the world. Neuschwanstein Castle, one of the most visited castles in the world, even inspired the Disney parks' castles.
Today's warm-up quiz is, the parents reminded the kids to stay in the blank water and not to go to the deep end, okay? What should go in the blanks? Should it be A, charming, B, important, C, shallow, or D, windy?
You have 15 seconds to think about it. Time's up.
Welcome to English for You, everyone. I am Mike. She is Tiffany. And we are back with day 2 of our look at kooky King Ludwig II.
Yes.
The former king of Bavaria, the fairy tale king of Bavaria, to give him the name, I believe, from the title of our article. We learned that this guy was born in 1845, so a year or two before I was born. And he was a king at a very young age. How old was he?
18 years old.
18 years old. Now, were you a queen at 18 years old?
I've been a queen since I was born.
Oh, you're so fabulous.
Queen since birth.
You're the queen of my heart. But you weren't a real queen.
In my head,
you were maybe the queen of your high school. I believe that, but not the queen of Bavaria or any other European kingdom. He was. So basically, he was a really powerful young guy, but maybe he wasn't quite ready for the job. I don't want to say bad things about Ludwig, but he was really into fairy tales, and he kind of wanted to live in a fairy tale world. So he made it happen. He built a lot of castles, but it was also expensive.
Yeah. Should we learn more about his life in today's article?
We're going to pick it up from where we left off.
It says here, on June 13th, 1886, something peculiar happened. When something's peculiar, it just means strange. So something really strange happened on this day.
Okay. Well, I'm not surprised. He's had a pretty peculiar life, and he's a pretty peculiar guy. So what other strange, weird, bizarre, or unusual things happened to King Ludwig back there in what was it, the
1886?
Ludwig and a doctor went for a walk near the lake by Berg Castle. Okay, so this would be probably after he was kicked out, or to use the proper term, deposed as the king of Bavaria, replaced with someone, because, you know, the officials thought he was kind of kooky. So they got rid of him, and so I guess he was living in this other castle, and he went for a walk one day near the castle. I guess that's pretty normal,
right?
He probably went for a walk every day just to get exercise. So, okay, what happened then?
Not too bad. Well, it says here, they didn't return when expected.
Okay, that's weird.
And people began to worry and search for them. Okay, so again, like maybe usually they do have these walks. They do it every day. They come back.
We've lost the king.
Yeah,
do you have the king?
Time,
I don't have the king.
I don't know where he is.
He went out and he never came back.
Yeah, so of course people began to panic.
Where's the king?
Yeah, people began to worry. They started to search for him. Exactly, search is this action right here. It means to look carefully for something or someone. So for example, if you lose something, you'll most likely search for it. For example, if you lost your earphones, right? Maybe you search your school bag, your pockets, or your room for them.
King Ludwig, where did you put my earphones?
Yeah, where did you put them? Did you take them? Okay, but here we can use search in a sentence like this. After the robbery, the police searched for any clues left behind by the thieves.
Oh, you got to look carefully for these things because they're not easy to find. And yes, if someone's walking in the woods or in the mountains, they could be anywhere. So that's why they have to search for them, especially if it's a super important person like a king or something like that. So, did they find them? Well, yeah, but not in a good way. Later on, both Ludwig and the doctor were found dead in the shallow water. Oh, that's
even more
That's
peculiar.
a good news, bad news. We found the king. He's dead.
No.
And in shallow water, we're going to come back to that later on. But let's talk about later on and shallow right now. Okay, later on is a term that means just not now, but at a time in the future, later on, okay? So if I'm talking about now I would say, I don't know, it's 2 p.m. What will I do later on? Well, later on I'll finish work, I'll go home, and then I'll make dinner or something. That's what I'll do later on. That's what I will do in the future, but not too far in the future. But I can also use this to talk about a time in the future, not from now, but from a time I was talking about, okay? For example, I could say last night I went home, I made dinner, and I watched a baseball game, and later on I did the dishes, took a shower, and went to bed. So I'm talking about things, and then I'm showing things that happened after that or later on. Remember, King Ludwig went missing, and then they found him later on. So that doesn't tell us if it was a day later, a week later, a month later. Just, it was some time after he went missing that they found him. And we read there how he was found drowned in shallow water. If something is shallow, it's not deep, okay? So when we think about things, especially the things that go down from the surface or from the top of the earth where we are, if it doesn't go down very far, it's shallow, okay? So if I take a shovel and I'm digging a hole and I only dig for about 5 minutes, well, I'm not super strong. I can't dig a deep hole. I would dig only a shallow hole. And the same way, if water doesn't have far from the top of the water, the surface, to the bottom where our feet will be, it's quite shallow. You can walk in shallow water, but if the water gets deep, which would be the opposite, you'll have to start swimming because your feet won't reach the bottom anymore. So water that is shallow, it isn't far. There's just a little bit of water there, and then we reach the bottom. For example, very important, don't dive into the lake until you know how shallow the water is. If you dive into shallow water, you could easily break your neck, and that would be extremely bad or even deadly.
Yeah, that is kind of weird that they were found dead in such not deep water, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't think it would be easy to die in shallow water.
Yeah, actually, you remind me of something. I think this kind of goes back to our warm-up quiz.
Oh yeah, that's true. We had a question about water, didn't we?
Yeah, and we have one of the words here. So let's see. It says, the question was, the parents reminded the kids to stay in the blank water and not to go to the deep end, okay? Let's take a look at our choices again. It was A, charming, B, important, C, shallow, and then D, windy. Okay, and as we heard a while ago, shallow means something that's not deep. So of course the answer should be C, shallow. Did you guys get that right?
I don't think anyone would have guessed important water.
Yeah.
Right? Don't go in the important water. It's too dangerous or something. Yeah. All right. Yes, definitely the shallow water is safer. The deep end, that's a good term. That's what we would talk about. In a swimming pool, the part that you dive into, that's the deep end.
Yeah.
The part that the little kids can swim in, or the one where your feet touch the bottom, that's the shallow end, which is, of course, safer.
Yes. Okay, so let's find out a little bit more about his death.
Yes.
It says here, officials said Ludwig died by suicide and that the doctor died while trying to save him. It's kind of weird, right? Okay.
He died by suicide. I don't want to live anymore. And he jumps into this shallow water, sticks his head in it, and he would have minutes to be in there for the doctor to just pull him out.
And then the doctor dies too.
But somehow the doctor dies in the shallow water as well?
Yeah.
That sounds a little unusual.
It's a little bit off, right?
Since he had been, kicked out of being the king and maybe he wasn't happy with his life, maybe he was thinking of suicide. That would make sense. But to commit suicide in that way, that seems weird.
It's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Suicide here just means the act of killing yourself on purpose. So usually we use the verb commit in the front to commit suicide to mean that someone sadly ended their own life. For example, we can say committing suicide should never be the option. So talk to someone if you feel troubled or sad. Yes, please don't hurt yourself.
Very, very true. Always reach out to someone. If you can't find someone, there are people in your community. You can find websites and
there's
phone
numbers you can call.
Resources to talk to, because suicide is never the answer. Back to the article. But many people didn't believe that story. Okay, the story about, he committed suicide and the doctor tried to save him and he died too. A lot of people back then, and us now, probably some of you too, are like, really? I don't know about that. So they're not saying they know who did it, but they're just saying that official story, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And here's a couple other facts that also make it hard to believe. Ludwig was a strong swimmer. He was known to be a guy who could swim. And they were found near the shore where the water was not very deep. Remember, they were found in shallow water. I mean, if they'd been out on a boat in the middle of a lake on a cold day, you could fall in, get too cold, you drown, But even that might not be suicide. It might be an accident. But committing suicide in shallow water when another person is there to stop you. Yeah, that sounds a little unbelievable.
And another thing here, this adds on to the story. It says, also, there was no water in Ludwig's lungs, which isn't usually the case when someone drowns.
Well done, CSI.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very true. I never thought of that. That's a really good point.
Yeah, because when you drown, what happens is all the water goes into your lungs.
Right.
And our lungs are basically the organs in our chest that we use for breathing.
Our airbags.
Yeah, basically they're somewhere around here. So if you drown, that means all the water goes in here and you can't breathe anymore, and then that causes you to die, right? We can also use this as an example sentence. Smoking cigarettes is really bad for your lungs, and it can increase the risk of getting cancer.
True, and it's one of those, vape vape
those are
things
worse.
Too. Those are worse for your lungs. Yeah, keep your lungs as clean as possible.
That's right.
We saw the phrase there, be the case. It might be the case that something, and that means the situation of some occurrences. So a lot of things happening, and we're giving this as the best explanation or the most reasonable idea about those things. We also had the word to drown. This verb basically means to die in the water because you've inhaled, you breathe in water. And of course, since you're not a fish or the Little Mermaid, that's not good for you, okay? So you can die in the water in other ways. Get eaten by a shark, have a heart attack or something like that and just die. But if you're in the water and you try to breathe while underwater because you can't, hold your air any longer, and you get that water in your lungs and that leads you to die, then you have drowned. So often when they find people in the river, those people have drowned at some point. For example, after falling in the river, Gary nearly drowned before people pulled him to safety. So that was very lucky. He maybe had swallowed some water. He was already coughing and finding it hard to breathe, having trouble breathing, but luckily he was pulled onto the land soon enough before he drowned, before his life ended. All right, so a very strange way to explain this very strange death of this king. A lot of people had trouble with it, him drowning in shallow water. He's a good swimmer. There's another person there, no water in his lungs. Anyways, as the article says, over the years, or, since then, people have wondered what really happened. Yeah, I'm sure people have wondered about it, written books about it, made TV shows about it. It is just one of those interesting mysteries of history that people still love to talk about and think about.
Exactly. Here it says, some think he tried to flee and had a heart attack. Others believe he was harmed by people who didn't want him to ever be king again. Okay, so some people believe that he was trying to run away from, because he had a heart attack coming on and he was trying to run away from it. I don't know why you would
Or maybe he's trying to run away from Bavaria. and just had a heart attack because he was running through the woods.
Too fast or something.
Yeah,
okay,
something
true.
Like that. That's why he was in the woods. He was trying to escape and had a heart attack.
Yeah, but whatever it is, it was still very, very strange.
Definitely, yes. And possibly he was murdered, and he drowned in the lake, that's just a story.
Yeah. We also saw the word harm, correct?
Yes, to harm is to hurt someone or damage someone physically. We can do this with things, but we often use this word more with people. You can harm yourself by not being careful. If you're cooking and you're not, careful with the hot things you're picking up or the knife you're using, you can harm yourself, you can hurt yourself. It's not, of course, killing yourself to that level, but it is to, damage or injure yourself. You can harm yourself. And there's other things you can harm too, not just your body. You can harm relationships by lying to people or things like that. We could also use it with objects. You might harm your bicycle if you leave it out in the rainstorm. It might get rusty and start to have problems. But often we use it for physical damage to ourselves and our health and things around us. For example, be careful with that knife, or you might harm yourself while cutting the vegetables. Yeah, you might cut yourself, for example.
All right, we did see a language in focus here for today's article, so let's take a look. Today's language in focus is the comparison of plural indefinite pronouns. We can use some, and others, and we use this when the total number of things or people isn't clearly stated. These are just showing two groups of things, for example. So in this case, others just means other plus the plural noun. Here's an example. Some people felt the ending to the movie was terrible. Others thought it made sense. Here, we're not too sure who exactly are the two groups of people, so we can use some to talk about one group, the group who thought about the movie ending, who thought that it was terrible, and others to talk about another group of people who thought the ending was okay. We can also use some, others, still others. When you have more than three groups of things or people that are not clearly stated. For example, we can say, the plane is getting ready to land. Some people are tidying up their belongings. Others are sleeping. And still others haven't finished their meals. Okay, there's another one that we can use. We can use some of the others. This is used when the total number of things or people is clearly stated. It means you know who the two groups of people are. These are just showing the two groups of things, for example. So the others basically just means the rest. For example, we can say some of the students in this class passed the exam, while the others will need to retake it. Here in this sentence, we're sure exactly who are the groups of people, for example, students in this class, and we can also use some to talk about one group, the students who passed the exam. The others is to talk about the rest of the group who will need to retake the exam. And the last example, or the fourth rule, is we can also use some of others, the others. When you have more than three groups of things or people that are clearly stated. For example, we can say, some of the paintings in the room are beautiful. Others look strange. And the others are not finished yet. Okay, so remember when you are using sentences where you have groups of more than three things, to put a conjunction in the front, like and, but, in front of others or the others. All right, so back to Ludwig. About his death, the article says, no one knows for certain. And for certain here just means for sure, certainly, without a doubt. Like nobody really knows.
Nope.
Yeah,
and if they do, they're not telling us or anyone. And my time machine is broken.
Oh,
so we can't go back and find out for ourselves. Well, today, King Ludwig II's dreamlike buildings still draw and delight people from all over the world. So yes, we might not know exactly how Ludwig II died, but I guess it isn't really that important. It was a long time ago. And his buildings, those amazing fairy tale castles that he built all those years ago, they're still there and they still delight and entertain people who really do travel, like from every corner of the earth to visit these places. Neuschwanstein or Stein, that's often one of those bucket list places that people really want to go to. So clearly, they're bringing delight or they delight people. We can use this both as a verb or a noun. And to delight something or someone, not usually a thing, but a person, is usually to give them great satisfaction, great joy, great happiness. If all your friends surprise you with a birthday party, oh, that would delight you. You would feel honored and loved and special and wonderful, and you'd probably have a really great time. You might also know this word that we often use for wonderful or fantastic, delightful. It was a delightful party. It was full of delight. It was full of wonderful, great, and enjoyable things.
That's right. Let's continue reading. It says, Neuschwanstein Castle, one of the most visited castles in the world, even inspired the Disney parks' castles. Yeah, I can kind of see a resemblance, right?
Yeah, like the Sleeping Beauty's castle. Is that Cinderella's castle? Sleeping Beauty's castle, I think.
Yes.
It is kind of similar, isn't it?
I need to go visit there. That's on my bucket list.
Me too. I definitely want to check that place out.
Go together.
And I didn't know that they had, that sounds like a great idea. And I didn't know they had several others, right? So Linderhof and some of the other ones, definitely worth a little road trip around Bavaria because it is a beautiful part of Europe to see. Anyways.
All right, so it's the end of the article, and that's right, chat question. Our For You chat is, who or what do you think really caused Ludwig's death and why? I feel like the conspiracy theories are going to come out for this one.
Yeah, I don't want to really go on the internet because I'm pretty sure it wasn't aliens or the CIA or the COVID vaccine or something like that. No, I think, although I think maybe it was a political murder. I mean, often, you know, in the past when kings and queens were kind of kicked out of their job, they did die young after that. And that was often because the other people in charge didn't want to have them around, or the king who takes over, his brother, his cousin doesn't want him around because people might say, hey, we like that guy more and he's still alive. Let's make him the king again. And they bring him back, which is, you know. I
feel like he definitely was probably assassinated because it's just too weird for me, I think, that he died in shallow water. Like, there's
a lot of that, and it makes sense that someone might want to kill him, right?
Exactly.
Because he is the ex-king, so.
Yeah. Well, anyways, if you enjoyed today's topic, you could come chat and practice more with a real teacher on AMC Tutor.
Can I do that too?
You don't need it, though.
But I'm so lonely.
I'll chat with you, don't worry. All right, well, that's it for today. We hope you enjoy the show.
Thanks, guys.
Auf Wiedersehen. Danke.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Shatsies.
Vocabulary Review.
Search. The police are searching for the boy who didn't come home last night. He might be lost. Shallow. Tommy practiced swimming in the shallow end of the pool because he couldn't swim well yet. Suicide. The police thought the man died by suicide, but later they discovered his death was an accident. Lung. After running up the hill, Tom felt his lungs working harder to get enough air. Drown. Wear a life jacket when you participate in water activities, as even the most experienced swimmers could drown. Harm. The boy didn't try to harm the cat. He just wanted to pet it gently.
智慧小补帖
Peculiar. Flee. Delight.